order. It is 6. Did anyone sign up for public comment? No? Okay, perfect. Someone did? Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Okay. No, that's the sign in. Oh, I see over here. Okay, gotcha. That's fine. So we'll go ahead and call to order. This is a work session. It's a little less formal than usual. We will have time for comments to be read at the end. And if you'd like to go ahead and join us, Sherry, I'll just turn it over to you and you can do your thing.
Awesome.
Okay.
Wow, right at the beginning. That's it. You just
That's
get up
it.
and go,
We're
right?
just going straight to you.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you. First of all, I want to tell you I'm super thrilled that I'm here tonight and not Monday night. I told Dr. Greiner that driving through 3 counties that required emergency vehicles only, I thought they wouldn't call me an emergency vehicle. So I'm super glad for that. Also made it into town early enough to have dinner at the homestead, and I love that place. I loaded up my back seat with dinner for the week and several trays of iced cookies. So it's good. It's been a good night and a good day. So thank you very much for having me tonight. This has been a wonderful 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks of working here within the community in person and also working virtually. And so tonight, just to give you a little bit of my background, in case you don't know that, my name is Sherry Switzer. I am an educational consultant with a company called Administrator Assistance. I live in Fishers, Indiana. I have 3 grown children there and a wonderful husband, and that has been our home for many, many years. So super thrilled to be up here with you again, see some familiar faces that I got to see at in-person meetings, so that's great. I was hired as an external consultant to really gather staff and community input. Ended up facilitating 4 meetings. 2 of those were virtual and they were planned to be virtual, and 1 was planned to be in person. And quite honestly, when we saw the registration numbers for the virtual meetings, I was a little concerned that maybe I wouldn't be able to hear all voices. And so we talked administratively about, could we run 1 more in-person meeting just so if folks felt like the virtual session wasn't enough or they just wanted to come and be in person, that they could come and be in person. So it ended up being 2 virtual sessions and 2 in-person sessions. So 2 things I'd like to ask of you tonight. First of all, please know that this is just a summary of perspectives. In no way am I making any kind of recommendations. It is sometimes beautiful being the outsider. So I don't know. I know what I have heard, and my job is to do my very best to share with you what I have heard and captured from the voices of folks that I have spoken with. The second thing I'd like to respectfully ask of you, I put a little yellow pad of paper there next to you. If you would allow me to go through each slide and get to the end of the presentation before we start fielding questions, that would be really helpful from 2 fronts. Number 1, you're going to see I start at a higher level of comments and shared values, and then I narrow that down as I go. So it's going to seem very general in the beginning, which you're right, it will be very general. But as I go, you'll see more perspectives based on some of the different folks and groups I talk to. So let me get through the whole thing. But your notepad is there in case you see something and you're like, oh, I want to ask, or gee, I want to make a comment. Jot that down right in the moment, and then we'll circle back to those at the very end of the slides. And they're not that long. There's not a whole lot of slides, so I promise they won't be up here for too very long. Okay, very good? All right.
I just got a text from someone that says it's really hard to hear you. So can you hold the mic
Get
so that
close
you,
up.
either that or hold it, whatever
What if I
you're
just stay
comfortable with.
here?
Okay, that'll
Does
do.
it come off?
I think so. Yeah, I think you pull it
If it
toward you.
comes off, you guys are going to watch. I walk and talk. So
That's fine. I do too.
There
And I
you
do
go.
this with my
Wow.
hands. There, perfect.
That's
Thank you.
fabulous. Okay. I got mic in one hand and clicker in the other. Here we go. Okay, so how input was gathered. I just want to reference this for you again. First of all, there was an anonymous community survey per board request, it to be anonymous, and all those results have been shared with you. Because I was not a part of creating that, I was not a part of disseminating that, and I did not collect that information, and because you already have all of that, I am not going to reference that survey tonight. Is it still on? You're just, okay, very good. Thanks. So I did share some high-level data that both Dr. Greiner and Ms. Roth had shared when I was in the different groups, but that is not feedback that I collected, and so I want to be sure I'm clear about sharing what I collected with you tonight. So you will see my information is going to come from those 2 in-person meetings. We had 27 attend in total. On January 14th, that was the late afternoon evening, really geared towards staff, 4 to 5 p.m. We had 13 staff attend that meeting. And then January 21st is the meeting I was referencing that we held to really further support those folks that had registered online. And so we had 14 attend that meeting as well. In the 2 virtual sessions, there were 74 attendees total out of the 107 that had registered. On January 13th, we actually had 65 register, and that was the first number I saw, and I said, oh my goodness, I don't know about hearing all voices, 65 people online. So 36 ended up hopping online with us, which was wonderful, and they did an excellent job. And then January 15th was the noon meeting online. Again, we had 42 registered for that one, and 38 attended online. Of the 74 total then that were online, 49 of them shared their name and role. And I'm assuming, and maybe I shouldn't, you have been a part of Zoom meetings before, but I asked up front to please drop your name and role in the chat. And not everybody does that, and you don't force people to do that. So that's why you see kind of some discrepancy there. 49 people did share their name and role, and the others did not. But I can see that they're on the screen, so that's all that. Of the 49 that shared, 20 of those folks identified themselves as in-district parents, and 10 identified themselves as out-of-district. So some high-level findings right out the gates, just to kind of give you that bigger picture. There is definitely alignment on values, strong alignment on values. Even where people's opinions differ about the policies, values are still very common, and I'll share some of those common values with you. There's very clear concern amongst all groups about the capacity, making sure we fully understand what is the capacity. They feel like they've heard some different numbers about capacity, so be very clear about capacity. There's concerns about fairness with the policy, transparency, that we're sharing out in front of everyone what the policy actually is. And then there's clear concerns about making sure that we prioritize residents. There is a risk out there of eroding trust if this policy would lack clear caps, clear communication, if it would lack data transparency, and if for some reason it would lack prioritizing resident students. So why segmenting voices actually matters. I really wish we had more breakdown like this, but it is really important to hear the different perspectives. And there are different perspectives between your in-district residents, your out-of-district residents, and your staff. So while I got the chance to hear some of that, I would also tell you again, there is a common shared set of priorities amongst all of them, even when the perspectives are just a little different. In-district residents, priorities, certainly for you to make sure that we are thinking about fairness to resident taxpayers, that we're mindful of the impact on property values, assessed value, and referendum support. There is some conversation around protecting access to parking, athletics, courses, ECAs, but there are some exceptions to that in the various groups that I listened to. There are concerns about discouraging families from moving into the district when we accept transfers. There's also some concern that they have a great desire for stabilizing your grade level sizes, as well as staffing in general and program stability. And then to be sure there's a clear distinction between access and entitlement. Staying with our in-district folks for a minute, what in-district residents supported: clearly defined capacity by grade level, residents prioritized first. There was some conversation about having a lottery if the transfer demands exceeded remaining seats. The objective caps and annual review. I did have several folks talk about considering a review of the policy every year. and maybe making changes if possible or if needed to that policy. There is also an importance for transparent and fair policy. Again, that objective criteria versus subjective criteria. I did have several folks commenting on that. Good suggestion by many to have an FAQ doc that maybe you would post on a website that would help maintain the facts. So that if folks were in situations they weren't sure what the facts were, or people were hearing things that may or may not be true, they could always reference an FAQ doc on a website that would contain the facts regarding the policy. The annual data report is something that folks would like to see. Again, this is all transparency that they're speaking of. Enrollment numbers, transfer numbers, what the fiscal impact is around all of that. And then there is belief also in feeling that once enrolled in West Lafayette schools, no differentiation between students. Some exceptions were voiced to that, but overarching feeling is when they're here, and they're part of the West Lafayette family. So out of district family perspectives, much of those conversations or comments were around the importance of sibling unity, keeping all kids in one family together, a need for predictability and stability. There's concern about abrupt displacement for currently enrolled students. There is a willingness to accept limits or caps if expectations are clear and communicated early. And then there was conversation also around the difficulty of purchasing or being able to afford to purchase a home within the district. They really want their children to go here and have that West Lafayette experience, but affording a home with prices and taxes and insurance is a difficulty, a hardship. At the staff meeting, staff talked about currently enrolled students coming first. Again, that's prioritizing those kiddos that are already here. Protecting class size and program qualities. They do talk a lot about that is what they feel one thing that West Lafayette Schools is known for is its wonderful class sizes, their high achievement, their high quality instruction. They want to make sure that that is protected.
Thank you. And before we go any further, I heard again that the sound had been lost. Brandon, do we have it back?
I thought I could hear it.
If the person who's texting me could let me know if you can hear me, that would be helpful.
Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me?
I hear it.
I might have touched the power button. Can you hear me now?
That may be also the kind of microphone you have to hold like this, and you can't hold it like
Hold it down here.
Oh.
I can
nope,
repeat anything. Anything that you would like me to repeat, I'm happy to do it.
Okay, she says we're back. And thank you to my secret friend for monitoring that for us. I think we lost you 3 pages back or so. That was when I got the text.
You want me to do the shared values again? That's 4 slides
I
back.
think that's worth repeating.
Sure.
Honestly. Yeah, let's do that. Thank you so much.
There's one back from that.
Okay. Yeah, that'll work.
Staff concerns?
Does that take us back far enough, secret friend? Technology is such a joy,
I know.
isn't it?
It is.
But everybody gets to stay home in front of their fireplace under a cozy blanket and have a cup of cocoa. She's typing. I can see the dots.
Okay.
Toot, 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 toot. She's writing Moby Dick or War and Peace. Oh gosh, you lost her when she was talking about staff. So yeah, that's the perfect place, I think, staff concerns.
Okay.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Very good. Staff concerns, it actually started here. This is the staff priorities. I'll just do priorities and then go through the concerns again. So priorities for your staff, currently enrolled students come first. Protecting class size and program quality. Again, they spoke about the high quality programs that you have here, the breadth and depth of the courses that are offered. They want to be sure that we maintain that high quality instruction, high quality achievement. Clear capacity definitions and a healthy range, or some folks referenced it as a happy range for enrollment, and that referenced what would the minimum number be to allow us to still maintain these programs we're speaking of, versus what's the maximum. We would have to consider doing something different. Avoiding staffing instability and job insecurity rolls kind of into that concern about recruitment and retention. I spoke a little bit about the first grade example that was shared with me, where if you lose a section of first grade, as long as we have a place to put that teacher in a different grade level, that's great. But if enrollment would continue to decline, if we would have to start to lose teachers, that does raise the concern then about recruiting teachers in the future and retaining teachers. Teachers can come and go nowadays more than we used to be able to do back in my day. So that was concerns from the staff. Again, staff mostly talking about the structure and the sustainability of the policy itself. Staff concerns in practice, the risk of over-enrollment to some of the courses, electives, activities. Over-enrollment can be great as long as you can staff over-enrollment so those classes don't get too large. But that's a risk. It's also a risk of programs being cut from unstable enrollments. In other words, you have enough to run the class this year, and then the following year you may not have enough. So again, they're looking for that stability, as most of us educators actually do. There was concern a little bit about geographic distance. So students that are transferring in that might live too far away may not get to be a part of some of the activities that we do here in West Lafayette as a part of the school culture. And then there is a strong desire from your staff for predictability, stability, and long-term planning. So this is a slide that talked about the shared values over all of those groups. Again, I think I've said this multiple times, and you're hearing in-district students being the priority. Certainly protecting the high-quality education that you already offer here at West Lafayette, and maintaining our small class sizes. Also wanting to protect the strong programs in musics, electives, ECAs, etc. Making sure that we are fiscally responsible, fiscal responsibility and taxpayer trust. There is a need for community to understand the interaction between transfers, referendums, long-term funding. How does all of this work together? What does that look like? stability for families that are already enrolled, fairness, transparency, and objective criteria. Again, the number of times I heard objective criteria is essential over subjective, and there is some perception that it was subjective before, so that's what all that is about when I was listening. Definitely want to preserve our capacity to support every student, looking really at the whole student academically, socially, and emotionally across a diverse school system, and the desire to maintain a diverse school system. And then long-term sustainability of enrollment, staffing, and funding. A unifying principle across all groups. While perspectives differed on the extent to which transfers would be accepted or should be accepted, there was a pretty broad agreement that transfers should not undermine resident students, quality programs, and the district's long-term viability. And in general, or overarching, what stakeholders are asking of any policy to include, that you include clear capacity definitions by grade level, that you find a way to prioritize residents, that you have objective caps, that you're transparent about data reporting, that the policy is published and clear. It's a clear process, and some even asked about that being presented at a board meeting so that stakeholders could come and listen and really learn about the policy from you. And then being willing to do an annual review to really see if in fact the policy that gets put in place, is it working? Is it helping us achieve our goals? Or are there pieces of the policy that we might be willing to change and or able to change? And then my closing was, this was my role, was to really gather this information, to be a listener, and then to summarize and synthesize it for you so that you had this in a high-level view, and also some very specific views from different groups that we spoke with. And then you get to respectfully work together to determine whether, how, and under what conditions student transfers fit.
Thank you so much. Perfect. Thank you so much for repeating it. I really appreciate you. Here's how I think the structure of the next part of the meeting should go. If anyone has any specific clarifying questions for Sherry, I think we should go ahead and do those now. And then we should hear the public comment that you said you had to read. And then after that, we can do our discussion. That way you can get back on the road, because I know you're traveling, and I think that would make the most sense. So clarifying questions, George?
Did anybody in any of the focus groups give you any indication why they thought transfer students would affect extracurricular activities or program quality or anything like that?
I'm not flashing red this time, so let's see. Can you hear me?
Uh-oh.
Thank you. No, mostly what I heard, it wasn't necessarily about the transfer students, it was about the numbers, the capacity to, can we support, it in my mind and in the notes that I have, it goes all the way back to what is the capacity. So people want to understand if the capacity is, and the numbers I heard was overarching capacity, so 2,200, 2,300, 2,500 are the three numbers that kept being thrown out in conversations with me. What is our capacity? So be very clear about that. The capacity also for class sizes. Where do you want to set that class size limit? Do you have a range, that minimum, that maximum? That was more of what I heard, not necessarily specific to a transfer student.
And following on that, did anybody give you any indication as to why they felt that in-district residents were not being prioritized?
No, I didn't hear anything about that. I heard that we need to make sure we prioritize them, but nobody commented on we are not prioritizing them right now. I heard nothing like that.
Rachel?
Going back to the staff questions, did you get a sense, I think it can be quite different between elementary versus high school students. Did you get a sense of particular grade levels that the staff were focused in, or were they kind of the whole range, or didn't have any?
So the first grade comment, so that was a specific comment to an elementary. maybe that's happening now. I got the sense that that has already happened, that we've had a first grade class that wasn't as big as other first grade classes. I can't verify that for you, but that was the sense that I got from the staff comment. The other end of that was really more about the electives, the AP courses, some of those higher level courses that we're able to offer up at the high school. We want to be able to continue to offer those courses without them getting too big, but also without them being so small that now we can't staff them.
Thank you.
David?
Staying on the teacher feedback, you had mentioned that some concerns were about the risk of over-enrollment in electives and activities, but then also there's the risk of program cuts from unstable enrollment. I'm assuming that the first one about over-enrollment is related to allowing transfers, whereas the second one would be related to if we didn't allow transfers.
You're correct. That's
Okay.
exactly how I took that. That's what I.
Were there others that you felt were specific to one or the other? Because they were a bit mixed in there. Or did you get an overall sense that there are more concerns about whether we have transfers or don't have transfers?
No, in that staffing conversation, they weren't all, I mean, to be clear with you, not every staff member in that room was 100% in favor of transfers. You know, there was one gentleman that spoke clearly to, he's not sure transfers is the best thing to do. But in general, they weren't talking about transfers versus not transfers. They were talking about numbers. They were talking about preserving teachers, making sure teachers felt like this is a stable community to work in. You know, how do we go recruit teachers if in fact our enrollment is down? So that tends to get them to, well, let's get our enrollment up. And if we can't do it in district, then transfers would help get our enrollment up. So that was the conversation, was more about protecting the teacher and maintaining that high quality instruction and environment that they already have.
Sherry, I'm sorry, I heard your mic's out again. Why don't you come be Michelle? And we'll give you your own seat with a mic that we can see the light on, and that'll work. Okay, perfect. Sorry. Yes, of course.
Okay. So to follow up on that, then generally it seemed like across all of the groups that you met with, the general emphasis was on stability and creating clear guidelines rather than we shouldn't do it or we absolutely have to do it and allow no limits. It's about a controlled process, right?
Yes. 100%. Also, that had to do a little bit with, you know, when people spoke to the fiscal responsibility of it, just really there is a strong desire to understand how transfers help from a financial standpoint, where the referendum fits in, if in fact you're doing a referendum, how does all that go together for long-term stability financially for you? Transparency on that is what I heard people saying or asking for.
Thank you.
Yue, go ahead.
I went to one of the focus group meetings as a listener, and so I remember that at the beginning of the meeting, you presented the survey result showing that the majority of the residents thinks about 60%
Yes.
of the residents believe we should take a transfer students. So I felt that whether or not, back to David's question, whether or not we should take a transfer student was not a question at those focus group meetings. So it's kind of like assumption, assume we will take a transfer, then what will be the concerns, what will be the priorities, and I feel the conversation is around that rather than, oh, do you think we should take a transfer or not? So that's my impression. Not sure, maybe I'm wrong.
Is there a question or?
Just to clarify, because David asked whether people support transfer or not, and I feel the question, the focus group discussion was not around whether or not we should set. It's more about, okay, if we accept transfer, what will be the concerns and you know, issues around the assumption that we will accept a transfer. So
Okay.
because the beginning of the conversation is, okay, the majority of the people, based on the survey we conducted, think we should accept a transfer. So I feel that's a starting point of the conversation. So that's why that's not in the conversation. That the question you asked was not in the conversation.
Okay, so that was a comment responding to David. I was just trying to find the question.
Well, that's
Gotcha.
also a clarification question because that's my impression. I just double check whether that's the case. And
Is that
just,
what you noticed?
You're right. The questions I was asking folks was really, what do you want us to be considering? If we're thinking about this, we're going to put together a policy. The 4 or 5 questions that I generated for each of those sessions was gathering more information from that group. What are things you want us to be thinking about, mindful of? What are your concerns? What are priorities? So it was digging a little bit deeper. Again, I did not see the survey nor the survey questions, so I really don't want to speak to that. But yes, that data is data I put up there and then just went a little bit deeper into tell me more about what you're thinking, how you're feeling, what should we be considering and thinking about as a board.
Okay. Any other questions for Sherry specifically? Nope. All right. Thank you so very
Thank
much.
you.
I really appreciate all your work and your time on this.
It was my pleasure.
It's
You're
been a
you're a great
joy.
community, great folks.
You know,
Appreciate
there-
it.
There is one other
Oh,
thing.
I'm sorry. Go
Are
ahead.
you going to leave a copy of these slides with us?
Yes, Anna and Dr. Greiner have them.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Super.
I think they're also in box for you to have available. Okay, Roberta will put those in. Those, yeah, should be in there, so.
All right. Thank you again.
Could
and
they
have a
also be
safe-
posted on the website so community members that want to see it?
Yes, Mrs. Mumford, we can do that. Thank you.
Have a safe trip home. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mrs. Switzer.
My pleasure.
Who had the item to read? Was that you, Deja?
I did. We had a community member that had emailed the board and asked if a board member would read this because they could not attend the meeting. So I said I was happy to. So it's Wenbin Yu, and he asked that I read, "Thank you for your efforts to represent the residents of the West Lafayette School District and for conducting the recent survey to gather community input. I'm writing to request clarification regarding the survey results indicating that a majority of residents support opening the school district. This conclusion appears inconsistent with the views expressed by many residents with whom I have spoken. Accordingly, I respectfully request additional information concerning the methodology used to conduct the survey. In particular, I would appreciate clarification on the following points. 1, whether survey respondents who self-identified as residents were verified as residing within the school district. 2, whether the survey instrument was designed to avoid leading, biased, or otherwise coercive language. And 3, whether safeguards were implemented to ensure that each individual was able to submit only one response. The reliability and validity of survey findings depend on adherence to recognized standards of professional survey practice. Absent such safeguards, the reported results may not accurately reflect the views of district residents and may risk misinterpretation, potentially undermining the board's good faith efforts to represent its constituents."
Thank you. And just because we pulled it early, did anyone want to say anything from the audience before we go on? Okay, great. In that case, we can go ahead and move into the discussion portion of the evening. So who would like to kick it off? George?
I'll be brave and start then. Just want to put some information out there for anybody listening, anybody in the room. Hopefully, the debate on transfers can be conducted respectfully, as the consultant said. But I just would like to put some information out for people to get a handle on what we're dealing with. So we talk about prioritizing residents in the district, which is fair. We talk about fairness, which is literally also fair. But if we're going to talk raw numbers, I looked just a moment ago on both Redfin and Zillow. Now, the boundaries of our school district do not line up with the boundaries of the city, so we also have to keep that in mind. Drawing a rough boundary of the school district, I see between 14 and 16 homes for sale right now within our district. If we were to ban transfers altogether, every single person or every single family that moved into those houses would each have to bring with them at least 11.7 kids. So I want everybody to keep that in mind during this discussion.
Okay, thank you. Rachel, go ahead.
So obviously, like everybody else, I've been looking at all the information and listening and trying to understand different positions. And I would just like to make a couple of points. One, we know that we have a very engaged population in our school. And because of the disparity in opinions, there is no possibility that we will pass this vote and everyone will be happy. And so I think that it does come down to making what we believe to be the best decision. I also want to, a couple of things have continued to stick out to me that I think are not broadly understood in our community. One of them is the price of those 14 to 16 homes. If we look at our enrollment numbers, they are substantially lower over the past 2 years. We know that kindergarten enrollment is dropping. If there were to be a requirement that people live in this town and they not have the option, we don't have a lot of housing that a young family could afford to come in and purchase. And it's not really a first mortgage kind of community in terms of property values. So I think we have to keep in mind, in addition to those numbers, what our pattern looks like in terms of enrollment and access to affordable housing. The other piece that I want to make sure that everyone knows, if we were to drop our transfers, we'd be sitting at 2,144 students. The state has been extremely clear over the past 2 years, and particularly that volume has ramped up in the past 12 months. It's something the ISBA, we've had a lot of conversation about, and the board of directors, but the state has made it very clear that school corporations under the number 2,000 will be strongly encouraged, if not forced, to consolidation. And so I do see that coming down the road. I think there's a lot of things trending. Sat in a meeting with the state superintendent of schools, and that was a very clear message. So I do think that we have to consider the most likely position for us would be to consolidate with TSC. And I think we all have to consider is if that is in the best interest of our community, if we were to become a part of Tippecanoe School Corporation. That is not a knock on TSC. They're wonderful, and I have no doubt they would make the best of that situation, but it will change how we function, how this function as school board, and it would eliminate, for example, the role of school board members. It would reduce our administrators who know our schools well. And so I think that we just have to be willing to have that be part of our conversation. And then finally, I do have one question that I don't really have a good answer to, and I'd like an answer at some point about it, is what kind of reductions in course offerings are we talking about? I guess I don't have a strong understanding. I understand we're going to offer every student language arts, English education, math education, science education. Those things are going to be offered. We're required by law to offer those things. When we talk about what the capacity is in those extras, in the arts, in music, in facts, in kind of other enrichments, I will say that, and some of those soft skills that we need to make sure that our students have to be successful, foreign languages, those things. What is capacity in those classes? What does that look like in the quote unquote extras? I don't consider them to be extras. Objectively, I don't think they're extras, but I understand according to the state value, they are considered to be extras. So that's one thing I would like a little more information about.
Thank you. And while I'm thinking of it, thank you for your representing all of us on that state level. That's a huge value to our community, and I appreciate your work there.
I also will tell you, and I know this is not the place in the meeting for it, but I do have a couple of concerns about the policy language that I haven't tacked on to here, but there's a few issues in there that when we get to policy, I want to make sure that we address those.
Okay, sounds good. I'm not seeing either of them jumping to push their buttons, so we'll let that question about what specific course offerings linger for now until that has.
I didn't push the button because I didn't think
okay.
that it was time to talk about that,
It's your
but I've written it down and we can certainly have dialogue with
Please,
administration
go
on
ahead.
that. Yeah.
Okay. And then is there anyone else who, yeah, Yue, go ahead.
Follow up follow up on Rachel's comments on the school district size. Actually, I checked Indiana's enrollment data, schools enrollment data for this year, and I found that 182 out of 290 districts in Indiana have enrollment below 2,300. And the optimum number we have been talking about, and 165 out of 291 districts in Indiana have enrollment below 2,000. So I'm not saying this is good, but just as a fact, that's a data I have. Another comments to follow up George's comments regarding the number of houses on the market, and actually I heard that many people in the districts had to remove their listing because they couldn't sell it at a price that they wished for. And several families at U Farm did that. They had to rent their houses out in order to wait for a better time. And now they are very nervous about it because, and before they thought, oh, when SK comes, maybe it will be a better market for SK families. So they are waiting for that time. But as some of you probably heard at one of the focus group meetings, the SK family actually expressed two wishes. One is they want to send their kids to our school district. Second is they want to live in newer houses. So at this time, many of those families are waiting for our policy. So if we open, they will live elsewhere. If we close, they will live in the district. So there's a dynamic there.
Let's see, Rachel to respond, and then George, if I'm reading that right.
Yeah, I want to validate, yes, UA's numbers are correct, and that's kind of been the point of the state of Indiana. There are a lot of school corporations out there that are small, and what we're hearing is that is not effective, and they want to consolidate them. And so wouldn't be targeted at us specifically, but would put us in a vulnerable situation, would be my point.
And they can arbitrarily change that number at any time. They could decide next week, okay, now it's 2,500 or 3,000, and that would also throw a wrench in the works. So
I'm trying to believe the best.
I hear you. George, what do you have to say?
You talked about people taking their houses off the market. How many people are we talking? We're talking 3, 5, 15, 50?
I certainly don't have the number. I'm not realtor, but probably if we talk to the realtor, they may have that more information about this. But I heard a lot, and also I heard from the empty nesters who are really worried, and some of them are thinking they're too concerned. One, some people are worried about SK. They feel they will move out. And when the market is better, or some people may move to where their kids are or move to senior home, and they wish to have a better price or good, decent price, at least, what they used to. But with the policy, they have a lot of uncertainties right now. They are really worried about the house market. And also, people told me that they haven't heard about the survey and this discussion, and because we don't have a way to reach out to those families when we do our survey, but probably, I think based on the number I got, more than 70% of the voters or taxpayers in our district actually don't currently have kids in our schools. So their voice are not heard in our survey. That's another issue, because we didn't have a way to reach out to them. And they felt, oh, we are taxpayers for so many years, but we are not heard for this important policy, which immediately impact their property value, impact their opportunity to sell their house in the coming several years. And the people have been waiting for SK to come, but SK's arrival kind of give people hope to sell their house at a good price, but now they kind of are losing their hope for it.
Okay. So are we a school board or are we a real estate development agency?
We discussed this question before. I think it matters to us because if you look at the survey and we also ask them about the referendum issue. So that matters us a lot because as many of you know, and referendum is super important for us. And the last time when we promoted, we said if we lose it, we will lose 70 teaching positions. And so, but if you look at a survey, people answer the question, okay, if we open, the majority of people said they will not support a referendum next time. If we close, the majority of them said they will support a referendum. I think that matters a lot. And we don't want people to be frustrated and enough to say no to the referendum. I feel that's a big loss for us.
Okay, so I don't want this to become a back and forth, but I will say one thing, because if we're going to share personal stories, then I'll also share one of mine. So I first moved into the school district, and I didn't have a kid that was school age. Gladly paid property taxes, gladly voted for the referendum. If we have another one, I'll gladly do it again. Because one of the better phrases I've ever heard as a guiding principle for life is one of the greatest things you can do is plant trees under which you will never sit. So it's our responsibility to build a community. It's our responsibility to keep the school district open and running for the kids. And I am not too particularly worried about home prices. And I'll tell you why. Because if we keep this place running the way it has been, if we keep it moving forward, then the home prices will take care of themselves. And it's also not uncommon for the majority of taxpayers in any district to not have kids in school. That's just the nature of society. I used to live in a place called Montgomery County in Maryland, and fully 54% of the county budget went to the schools, and it showed. But I can guarantee you, it wasn't 54% of the people that had kids in those schools, because you're always going to have a mix of people that are single, retirees, people that chose not to have kids, who live in any place. So we're always going to have a majority of people paying for something that only a minority of the people use. But again, it goes back to that old saying, you plant trees to give everyone shade.
Let's give David a chance to respond.
I think some of the concerns that have been raised regarding transfer students taking resources that in-district residents are paying has been something that several people have raised. But when I look at these numbers that Dr. Greiner shared earlier today about the number of students per grade, generally looking at it, there are about 7 transfer students in kindergarten up through 25 in 10th grade. I'm going to focus primarily first at the elementary and intermediate school grade. We have target average class sizes of 22. In kindergarten, first grade, 23, the next 3 grades, 24, then 25. Currently, we're at 1920, 1920.5, 21.75, 20, and 22 and a half. We are below the target size. Now, I know that smaller class sizes are great. I would, if we could afford 15 per kid, or 15 kids per teacher, that would be a wonderful space, but we also can't necessarily do that. Adding in 2 children to one specific grade, or actually, let's say kindergarten, adding in 7 kids, that's caused the average to go from 18 kids per class to 19, right? We don't pay any additional teacher salary for that because they're all in existing classrooms. But we get the several $1,000s from the state per student. I assume that there are some behind-the-scenes costs per student that can't necessarily be captured. Just the administrative costs of having a student, there's some amount there, but I think one of the important things is that allowing a controlled level of transfers allows for more balance, more stability, but also provide substantially more budget for the schools without adding additional cost, which I think is something that's really critical, especially given our discussion over the last couple months of property tax changes. So I think that that's something important, that they're not just taking resources. They're actually providing additional resources, even without the added money that we previously charged for transfers. So to me, there's a lot of net positive that allows us to provide those extracurriculars. With 7 kids in additional kids in kindergarten isn't costing us more in terms of hiring a teacher, but that 30 to 40,000 or whatever it comes out to allows the school district to afford other teachers, afford specialist teachers, maybe afford some time for additional buses that can take kids on field trips. All of these types of things, it helps bolster the budget so that we can offer, I think, a lot of the important things that we do offer.
Thank you. Yue, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a follow-up comments regarding these prioritized in-district students. I don't know whether that's a common agreement already or not, but I heard questions about how to operationalize this concept. Also earlier in the presentation given by the consultant, we also talk about once kids are in, everybody should be treated equally, right? So one saying is in-district kids should have priority. The other side, they should be treated equally. And so I'm not take a stand on this issue, but I just share some questions I heard from the community regarding this issue. And for the common classrooms, I think that it's not a big problem, but people are asking questions about the limited resources, especially the resources, and we said we use referendum to support, for example, the ECAs. And people ask about also talking about the limited resources, including parking permits. They're not enough parking. Who should get the parking permits? And athletic teams, who should get in the varsity team? And academic competition team activities and their competition teams, and it's very selective. Not everybody who wants to do it can do it. Then who should get on? And special education compensations like a 504 plan, IEP, and the resources are limited, and the school districts subsidize those services, and we have limited supplies. Also, enrollment for some oversubscribed courses. For example, 38 students want to take a certain class. Who can take it? Who shouldn't take it? So sometimes we have to make those decisions at that time. Do students have equal right to get those limited resources? That's a question people ask. As also explanation for the prioritized in-district students, and so I think earlier we discussed what that means. So here, something more concrete.
Well, special ed services are covered by federal law, so I don't think those would be up for any debate at this table.
But sometimes people complain that, oh, my kids should be eligible for it, but they don't get it. And because we don't have enough funding for it. That's what I heard. I don't know what the practice is.
That's covered by federal law. That would not happen.
But I remember earlier we said the state funding is not enough for us to support those services. We have to subsidize it ourselves. So, yeah.
Right, but we're not going to deny a child fair and appropriate public education because we
Yeah,
have them
I
from a
understand.
different
I'm just
area.
give
I'm-
that as an example for limited resources.
Right, I just want to be very clear as the school board that we are going to provide the required by federal law education that every student is entitled to. George?
So for anybody listening out there, our email inboxes are open. You can email us at the school board address or our addresses individually. I would love to hear from folks who think that there are things that transfer students shouldn't be allowed to do or have. I'm serious. If anybody truly has some ideas about what they want to limit to people who happen to be here from outside the district, please tell us.
Okay, Rachel?
I have said these words before, but I think it's a good time to raise them again. And I'm not saying this is pro-transfer, pro-open, whatever. I just want to also say that one of our jobs as a school board is to consider what is a good culture for us to have. We talk about the great culture of high academic performance. We talk about the great culture of high expectations and community and parent involvement and all of those things. I think we have to continue to consider if living in a community with a very homogeneous socioeconomic position is advantageous to our students and their good development. And the mission of this school corporation is to prepare children to be successful in the world. And if we do not have the ability for affordable housing that young families can purchase, that single parents can purchase, that parents that earn anywhere in proximity to the poverty line could possibly afford to purchase, we may be, I believe we are, but I will say definitively, we may be reducing our children's exposure to a normal society and an education that will truly prepare them. So I have a little bit, I have a little bit of concern, continued concern about that as well. What type of culture do we want to have in our community?
I feel that kind of is based on some assumption that people who live in the district are richer than those who transfer. And that's also some frustration I heard from the residents. And because not everybody who live in the district are richer families. And as you know, more than 10% of our kids are on the reduced price of free lunch. And many people actually save money to either buy a house or rent a house in our district. On the other hand, not everybody, but some transfer families actually live in a much bigger house, better one, outside of the district. And so I don't think people feel hurt when we say that if you don't agree with the transfer policy, you are selfish, or you are richer people, you don't have sympathy. That's not the case. People have been supporting our districts so generously for so many years. Now we label them as that. I don't think it's fair for them. And so, George, you ask people to email the school board, I don't want transfer student to do this or that. That's not what their intention. They only want fairness, that's all. And so I don't think it's fair to say that. Also, actually, many transfer families are willing to pay for the fee, and they have been paying for that for so long. It's not, right now, the state policy doesn't allow them, not allow, actually, if people want to donate, they're still welcome to, but they're not required to pay the fee. I think we have to make it clear, don't hurt the residents anymore. I don't think it's fair for them. They have been supporting us.
Okay, let's go Rachel and then George.
It's important for me to say that I am not saying that people in our community who are able to afford to purchase a home in our community are selfish and do not support our students. That is a bit of an exaggeration of what my comments were, or misunderstanding. The difference is if you close transfers entirely, there is no option for a lower income family to bring their child in. They either need to live in one of the subsidized housing options, which are very limited in numbers in our community, or they don't come in. So I think it is a position, and UA is correct. There are some families who have lovely homes, and no judgment on them. They've worked hard for that. And they have every right to live in the home that they can afford. My question is, do we want to close the door on people who might really benefit from being here because it just wouldn't be an option? And does that truly benefit our students? I don't think that it does.
Okay, George?
And I don't like it when people interpret what I say in words that never escape my lips. I fully understand that we have quite a few people living below the poverty line in this town, in this district. I fully understand that there are plenty of underpaid and overworked graduate students at Purdue and potentially remote from other places who live here and avail themselves of our school district. I want those people here. I know some of those people personally. I tell them this is a great place to live. I told the president of Purdue that this is one of his greatest recruiting tools, to bring people here. So if we're going to discuss things, if we're going to talk about numbers and accuracy, please be accurate and only refer to what I actually say and not what you think I said.
David?
The four of us have been bouncing back and forth. I wanted to make sure that Lawrence and Daisha had opportunities if they wanted to jump into the conversation.
Desha?
Just to share a few points that I think questions or comments have been shared. In the survey, it was shared that we spend $18,000 per student to educate them. So when we bring in $7,000 for transfers, there is a difference that our in-district residents are having to pay for. A second point is that as we take students, does it affect the students that we currently have? And I have a hard time seeing the numbers that we're seeing to say that that's not true. So for example, in 7th grade last year, we had 191 students in 7th grade. When we had class sizes, so this 25 number is the average class size. And I've actually asked Dr. Greiner if, he can get updated numbers to share what are the max class sizes that we're seeing at the junior, senior high school. We have classes, for example, last year we had language classes, health classes that had kids, 35 to 39 kids in a classroom. So to me, if I had a 7th grader and a bunch of transfer students had been accepted as 7th graders, I do feel like that I don't find it acceptable that my kid's sitting in a class of 35. So, and this year we even have higher in 7th grade. We have 209 sitting in 7th grade right now. And so that is one point. Another point was even in the best of circumstances in the elementary school, if we're below capacity, so whatever that number is, if the ideal number is 22 or 20, if we have less than that, bringing one in is not going to cost us an additional teacher, but there are additional costs. One more student is additional work on a teacher. There is a cost to that teacher. There's additional resources, often paraprofessionals, a bunch of things. So I just think all of these, as we make the decision that we want to make that's best for our school district, that we need to be looking at all the facts of it and not trying to adjust them. And then one more point that I wanted to make is, I think that there has been some comments shared about if we accept transfers or not, and what's the differences once those students are in here of privileges. And I don't agree with that viewpoint. I don't want to hear division of our students. When we have students arrive, every single one should be treated equally. And so I would prefer to have our community members be reaching out and sharing what's their priorities for us as we're considering transfers and not transfers. And most importantly, because I think we all agree, there's out-of-district residents that want the ability to attend our schools. I don't think anyone disagree with that. And they've given a lot of great perspectives, but our accountability and responsibility is to the in-district residents. And so what is it that they feel like if we were to bring in transfer students, how does that benefit the in-district residents and of course our students? And then my last point that I would love to do is actually shift the conversation to a conversation about the referendum, because what our decision about this may have a huge impact on if the referendum passes or doesn't pass. And that will bring in a lot more money than any amount of transfer students can bring in. So when you look at the data from the survey, and like I said, I agree, this survey is not a perfect survey, and it should not be what we're saying is driving our decisions. The survey, like the focus group, should just be giving us information. But one point that the survey does share from those that filled it out is there's a 14% point increase in support for the referendum if the district is closed. And so I think that's where a lot of our discussion needs to be right now is how do we pass the referendum? That's the funding we need. And if that's our goal, how do we meet the needs of our in-district residents there who have to vote for it? And what's going to meet those needs? I would like that to be more of the discussion that we're having right now, if possible.
Okay, George?
You know what, that is an interesting point, and it also goes to something else that you guys said that we were referencing a minute ago. With people who are scrimping and saving to afford homes here, it really does put us between a rock and a hard place, because we need the funding to come from somewhere. And the funding from transfers, there's issues of fairness. But funding from increasing the referendum to make up for not only what the state has taken away from us, but what disallowing transfers would also take from us, I wonder if that would push the property taxes so high that some of those families that are already at the edge might consider leaving.
David?
I grew up in a place where property taxes on homes are more expensive than my mortgage right now. A lot. I want to tie these things together because I think this is getting right to the point of what we need. First, I want to say, Daisha, I absolutely 100% agree with you about when a student is here, they are our students, and I fundamentally disagree with the idea of unequal education for our students. And so I don't think that we should be thinking about prioritizing one way or the other for students. They're our students. But I do want to pull back a little bit to, we spend $18,000 per student, which is the number that we spend. But it's kind of misinformation of a number, or not misinformation. It's not, it doesn't actually capture what it costs to educate one more student, because most of those costs are already sunk costs. They're costs that we spend on building operations. They're costs that we spend on vitally important things like principals and administrators. The cost to add one student to a classroom, when we already have the teacher, when we already have everything else, one student in isolation, the added cost is not zero, but it's pretty close. Their time cost, it's more work for a teacher. So these are things that we absolutely need to pay attention to make sure that class sizes stay manageable and have restrictions on there. But now adding 10 students, that might stretch some other things, add some more costs in terms of the number of sections for specials, or at the high school might put some strain on certain topical areas. So those are going to be important things to keep in mind as we think through what the right transfer policy is. But right now, with 58 transfer students, that's about $1.1 million in funding that we get from the state for those students, assuming the 7,000. It's not exactly 7,000. It's 7,000 and change, right? Yeah. So that's $1.1 million. That if we say no to transfers, and we've already said yes, that we're maintaining all of our current transfers, but as transfers graduate and leave, that's a deficit of $1.1 million that we would need to make up, and then need to ask our in-district residents to pay that much more through the referendum. And so there's this balance here of we are going to need to rerun the referendum because of the changes that the state has made to tax law. Actually, what we pay is going to be going down because of, maybe, potentially, what certain groups like apartments and businesses are going to pay is going to go down a lot. So we have to figure out what makes sense financially for the district as part of this. And we can't just look at it as we are subsidizing transfer students, because in fact, that $1.1 million, not all of it, but a lot of it is actually subsidizing in-district residents to reduce what we are going to have to pay in the referendum to operate what we're trying to do. Thinking about the elementary and intermediate schools with our, I'm using that because that's just easier math at those ages. We're adding maybe one child per classroom and bringing in substantially more. That doesn't add the number of classrooms that we have to have, the number of teachers that we have to have. It doesn't add, at the numbers that we're at, it doesn't add necessarily more special sections. And so it's something that I think that we need to keep in mind, that we're not adding costs when we're adding transfer students right now. And where's the limit of how many students do we then start accruing costs? Like, at what point do we then need to open another classroom, which adds more cost? And so I think that it's really important for us to make sure that we're not viewing, or that we're viewing this in the whole as how this actually benefits our district. Sorry, that was a little bit rambly.
That's okay, Rachel. But say it with your microphone.
I would say that considering cost of what students do at the high school level, so sending a student to the GLCA will come with the cost, but it also comes with increased funding from the state. So I will say there can be a higher cost, but at the same point in time, the state recognizes that some of those programs are more expensive to run. So we do get some money through those programs.
Depending on the track.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's built into the grant, the basic grant, yeah.
And there's, just from a programmatic standpoint, those are more expensive programs to run. If you're thinking from one year to the next, who would want to take an AP physics course? So you don't always have a steady supply. At the elementary level, everybody is going to take third grade math. Everybody is going to take third grade English. It's more or less predictable. It is less predictable at the high school level, especially when, I would say, when you get to the junior, senior level where students have more options.
I was also going to say, when you look at what we used to charge for transfers to come in, we charged more for 7th through 12th than we did for K through 6th. And so it was, and for us to educate the kids, there's a difference of 800. TSC was a little bit different. But anyway, across the board, the most expensive was 9th to 12th grade. And it's a difference of about $900. And so that was the difference, because we were billing families depending on what grade they were in. And then we said what it cost us, could we put on the chart, what TSC could put on the formula, and then what was the difference? And it's not a ton, but there is it was a higher cost to send kids to our schools if you were in 7th through 12th.
Yue?
Just a follow up with David's comments regarding the current transfer number 158, and so I feel you said, oh, if we stop taking transfers, we will lose that many students state funding. The assumption for that comments is people will not change where they live with the policy. But the reality is people will change where they live with the policy. So if we open, we encourage people, or at least we don't encourage people to live in. So if we close, we encourage people to live in the district. So I feel that again, that's a dynamic process. And also, if we close, we also encourage people who don't need to send their kids to our schools to sell their house at a good price and live elsewhere if the market is good.
Lawrence, long time no see.
Oh, that's okay. Yes. I just want to share something because the survey, regarding the survey things, the major purpose we do these surveys, we want to get better understand of our communities, what their perspective regarding our transfer policies. So majorly two things. One is what is our policy affect they're moving, either or not they're moving into the state, into the district or move out. So that's one question we try to figure out. Another thing is we try to figure out about our policy, the policy impact on their intention to support the referendum. So for those two questions, I look at the data. Totally, we have 626 in district response. And if you look at their intention to move out of district, and if we open the district, so there's about 99% saying they are going to move out of district. So, and that's a little bit, because that's something 99 over 600, something like 1 over 6.3 persons will move out if we open the transfer. So that's a little bit, for me, I don't know what you guys think, but for me, a little bit scary. You walk down the road, walk the dog around the community, and every 6 properties, you will see a for sale sign. I'm not comfortable with that. So basically, we still want to build a strong and stable communities. So, and regarding the affordabilities, I think we have, if I'm correct, we have more than 20% of our students, something like 25% on the half lunch support, free lunch or lunch support, something like that, 25%, right? Something like.
Yeah, I thought 23, free introduced lunch.
23, 20? Yeah, something.
We'll look at that.
Yeah, that's okay. Something like around, at least it's more than 20%. So people, people saying it's too expensive and cannot afford. That's not alone. We have many of them in our district. But the things from our from board's point of view, because we want to base our decision based on the consequence. So it's not really people came in the housing market. If 1 or 6 people put their housing on market, and then there will be pressure on the housing price, and the housing price will very quickly transfer to our revenues. That will be going down to revenues. So that's for our long-term financial sustainabilities. So I think that's probably something we need to take into consideration. And also, it took a village to raise a child. So as all my board member shares, we welcome the transfer student. I welcome transfer student, but I not only welcome the transfer student, I also welcome their families. So please join us, join our communities. The school is just, it's not a standalone institute. It's part of a community, and the community is our foundation. So join us together, we can build a strong community. So that's regarding the community. And when you put the housing on the market, doesn't mean the pricing going down and it make the housing affordable. There's some investors may come in, they take the house and rental to some students for the business, and then the structure, the compositions of the community changes. So so from our school point of view, maybe they may transfer that to the, short-term Airbnb things. So maybe you permanently lost the student I mean, in the district. So that's one concern I have. And regarding the referendum things, I see we have a question, if we open the policy, what's your attitude intention for the next referendum? If we close the transfer, what's the intention, support or not support for the next referendum? So from what I can tell, if we close the transfer, we get 61% to support for next referendum. But if we open, we end up with 47%. So that's something like a 14% difference. And 47% is kind of below 50%. So my point is, I mean, the transfer student can bring in some cash, no problem. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was waving at somebody who was leaving.
Oh, okay. So that's okay. I saw you were trying to say something. That's fine. So basically, my point is transfer can bring in some money, but we don't want risk of our referendum. It is also a good opportunity to build up the core community trust. So we have a stable and a strong community. So we have financial support. So long term, we can have provide the best education to our student. So there's, I mean, this is quite complicated. So, but we need to think about this. That's my concern regarding this whole process. And a couple of days ago, I talked to a student, and she has kids in our school. So she's saying, "Do you guys decide? She have to make a decision, rent an apartment in district, so she don't need to buy a car, or she move out of district, have a cheaper apartment, but she have to buy a car." So I mean, so what I'm saying is our decision is not just we sit here just make decision. It's quite impact a lot of families. So I hope we can answer the questions and the people's questions, and we can get the better policies. I won't say I don't think we have find perfect policy, everybody happy, but we try to make that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. George and then David.
So I'm glad you mentioned renters, because that's actually one of the things we need to think about. And not just us, but everybody in the community, because we have a lot of apartments here and a lot of people who rent houses. Renters can vote, for one. And two, anybody that's renting in an apartment is not paying property taxes, and the property taxes for the people who do own those apartment buildings was just reduced. So there is a lot that we have to consider, not just home prices and not just whether or not people are going to buy in or buy out of the district, but we also have to consider the people who may not be paying property tax at all, but still live and work amongst us just like anybody else.
David, go ahead.
So two things. First, to have them closer to 20. How many more students would we be looking at potentially getting if we went to an open district model where we had to do a lottery versus maintaining the current system, maybe more spelled out with TSC? I think having some of those pieces would be really helpful. What's the added cost beyond initial classrooms of adding students? How do you propose to evaluate this each year? I do think that having some type of not a formal evaluation, but review of where we're at each year is good practice for us. So I'd like for all of us to provide that information to our administration now, and we can also do it through email as we go through over the next week, so that they can provide us with their recommendations so that we can then discuss something tangible.
You keep doing spoilers for what I'm going to say. Let's hear what Rachel has to say, and then we'll move toward that.
You know, I get excited when we start talking about policy. I have a series of questions on this policy that's in our packet to take a look at tonight, and I don't know that you would have answers to them, but I wanted to kind of walk through with you what I saw as I was reading it. Starting with C-125, Section A, Item 2, there just seems to be some question like board versus the superintendent. I think it's a language thing, but it must notify the Board of School Trustees superintendent of the school corporation. And I don't believe that we want parents to notify us. So I just think there's a language issue in that section.
Yeah, if
So
you're going to get divorced, it has to be approved.
to be clear, this is the policy draft from CCHA. So what you would do as a board is, as you're suggesting, that's the kind of detail that you would discuss in the committee, and then the entire board would determine that.
So that is the only one of my questions that is of that typographical nature. The
Okay.
rest of them are questions, so I didn't want to leave that one off. That one
No,
doesn't
and
make
I just wanted you to understand that
Yeah.
we've put this in here from there. We haven't like developed something. It's the policy to keep us consistent with the church or civil interim that we use today. And then from there, you guys would, with us, work to consider community input versus board expectation versus what we do as practice. We would do that very similarly to the other policies.
Well, and I know I agree, and I think, though, that some of reading this policy was very helpful to have this policy because at draft from them, just because as I was reading it, it brought up questions in my mind that I think other board members may also have. In item C, it states specifically that non-resident students may be accepted into the summer school program provided by the corporation. So to me, that means it is an exception to transfer student. Anybody could come in and say we had a summer science offering. Anybody could apply to be in that. Is great. My question is that specifically exclude remediation? Is summer school remediation, say at the elementary level, is that separate from this? Or should there be language that is separate? I do believe it would be at a disadvantage to some of our students who may need some additional academic support if 10 additional kids came over because they heard we had a great summer reading program. So I think philosophically, that's just a question I had when I was reading it. And I don't know what the current practice is. And I don't know if that summer remediation is actually considered to be summer school or if it is a separate beast.
I know you're not expecting answers, but just thinking how we would do this at the table with the committee and then coming back, my assumption would be that we would do current practice, and because we have transfers now, right, with TSC. We do not invite other district students. It's our students. So the students that are our current transfer students and our students that we have in district. So that is a discussion we'd have. I would not recommend we go out and invite others in, but we could certainly have that discussion like we normally would.
That might be a good question for our principals to see if that might be a revenue. No?
We could ask the principals, yes, but I'm just saying, I don't know that we would even as a
It's in here,
board.
that's why I just-
I think this is premature. Are we going to pass it? And then we would have that dialogue.
Okay. I
Yeah,
see.
but I'm happy to talk about it. I'm just saying it's kind of premature.
I have two more things that I don't understand fully, and I just want to put them out there, as I think they're important, and I think this is a situation, well, I have great confidence that Lawrence and David and I would have a great conversation. I think these are going to be sticking points for our community as well, because they touch very much on that point of making sure that our students have a priority. So another one is in item D, there is a question about a student who leaves mid-year. And one thing I noticed in here is it doesn't specifically address the exception for seniors, for 12th grade students. And so that's one thing I have a question is, we need to clarify that once they're a senior, they just get to stay, and that is protected. So that language isn't in here.
We can certainly clarify it, but that's the law. So whether or not that's policy or not, as our attorney always says, the law supersedes. So if we have a senior, they're here for the year.
Correct. But I do think as a community member reading they would perhaps also have that question. And then finally, my last item on this one is really just a question in item E. It talks about for staff, students, it talks about a boundary of $8,000. And I am just curious what of our employees, I'm assuming coaches fall in that, what of our employees would fall under that $8,000 mark? When we talk about a teacher, a staff member coming in, yeah, what does that look like? I'm sorry, and it's item E, section 3A, where we get that. So I'm curious about that section, and in there is what staff would it affect? And when you come back to us, I'd be curious to know what that looks like in a practical position.
So I think this is a good point for you have to start somewhere, which I say about every meeting. And I don't think that going through C-125 and arguing word by word or line by line is going to be a good idea. But I do agree with Rachel that things that might need to be bounced to legal or to the administrators in the buildings would be good things to raise early, so that when you, as a policy committee, come together to discuss this policy, you have that information. So, David, or Lawrence, go ahead. Yeah, that's fine.
That's the
Microphone.
Yeah, that's a question, procedural question. How so? It's also to the question to you committee. The policy committees. Do you think? This is the issue. Do you think we can work on the first and then the whole board discuss, or maybe we can have the whole board have a working session to working on these things? What do you guys think?
Well, I would, in my opinion, there's going to be some different opinions about some of these matters, right? I think,
Yeah.
And so I think our normal process of taking a policy and inserting different board member opinions and recommendations on language is important. If there are some, so I think it's a both and, I would do both and. I think that there are also going to be potentially some members of the board who say, I don't like this policy at all, and I do not want to pass it. And if that's the case, then that's another function of this policy is to vote it down, right? So I think that for me, it's about putting together the most cohesive option packet for a policy and then determining what is in it and then what passes.
And to clarify, so the $8,000, that's determining if it's a staff transfer or a transfer that's not a staff member, to make sure you understand that, Mrs. Witt. And an example could be like a lunch aide. They would not qualify. They would be a staff member, but they wouldn't qualify. And to answer your question, if the board wants that information, we absolutely can work with our HR department and figure out exactly which staff members that involves. But that's one example. And so that would be to determine, that wouldn't change. This again's legal. So that wouldn't change. This is to spell it out, which ones are staff members that are transferring and which ones then are non-staff members, especially if the determination is that staff members have priority in a lottery type situation. So spelling that out would be important, but it wouldn't change. It would be what's stated there. Does that make sense?
Right, for me, I just would like to understand the impact. That's really where I'm coming from, is what is
Those are
that
the current
impact?
numbers we use. So
They're
in
the same.
theory, it would be the impact that it currently is and has been.
Okay, okay.
And I know that there are some positions where people know which positions would qualify versus wouldn't qualify.
Okay, thank you.
Daisha, go ahead.
So in discussing the timeline, and then I do have a question on the policy, I think it would be helpful for the policy committee to work through this because it is very unimpressive what they put together and how messy. I mean, I'm very unimpressed with legal counsel for what they gave to us. There's lots of errors in that. So I think someone in the policy committee starting it and making it as clean as possible to meet the needs would be helpful. But my concern is if we wait for the policy committee to do that, then we start discussing whatever went on it in February, then it's not ready for us to vote by March. And so I feel like it would be super helpful, whoever, policy committee or whoever, prep something, we then have a discussion about it and have everything the best that we can. And like Rachel says, we're not voting on it, but at least have it like, here's the options that's going to be on a transfer policy, ready to go by February so that it is potential to vote in March. I did have a couple things that I did think would be helpful to discuss as a board. Not that anyone needs to share their opinions, I mean, meaning the policy committee can put all this in there. I just think there's some things that we need to seriously understand and consider is so capacity, like David's point is, I think, key to this. What does capacity look like? Because we have capacity set right now, yet we exceeded that capacity and accepted transfer students this year. So kind of addressing what are we saying is capacity, how are we going to not cross that? That, I think, is a very complicated and needs to be dealt with. But the other part that I feel like that really needs to be considered is how do we prioritize who applications get accepted? And so the first question is, our current transfer students, are we going to put in policy that once you've been accepted, even if we exceed capacity, you're still allowed to stay? Or once we exceed capacity, now our kids worried, so that's got to be addressed in the policy, in my view. And then the point of what priority rules. So right now the policy says if you're a staff member or if you have siblings in the school district, you're treated equally. You get the highest priority. But the thought would then be if we're past capacity, we now have teachers who do not get to bring their kids in the school district is the way it's currently written. And so is that really, we've brought up preschool students who begin kindergarten. We have to put in it students who had a resident, no, we don't have to. We've covered the students who had a resident change, but will they get any priority? So if a student's been in our school district for 10 years, they move out, they are now not considered a current transfer student, but are they just thrown in the mix like everyone else? Or do they get a priority? My understanding is we do have to say students from an accredited non-public school, we have to allow them to have priority over others, is what Indiana code says, but we can pick the order. And so in reading a bunch of policies, it looks like as a board, we get to determine at what level are we going down. And if it's like staff children, they just get in even if it's past capacity. Or like, who is that involving? And then what's the level? So let's say we have 2 spots open and we have siblings from a family applying and we have past students who's changed residence and we just have 2 new families. Are all of those applications getting thrown in the lottery or are just the top one? And so part of the discussion needs to be, and in some ways, I think if we at least people, and they maybe haven't had a chance to think about it, were to share a few voices, maybe the policy could be a little cleaner, because there's a lot of things to consider even on that one point.
I just want to say, Mrs. Mumford, you're spot on. And to support what you're saying, we were looking at, as we were hearing community input, but we didn't want to be presumptuous, of course, but we were looking at, and we actually started toying around with writing policy with what we heard. But then we looked at this starting point policy, and then we started tying it into that. And then we kind of said, and you can speak up because I'm speaking for it, so you can say, Sean, wait, change that. We started saying, wait a minute, now we're talking policy versus guidelines versus FAQ, because we've been hearing that too. Because so the policy could be making sure we're following the law. We didn't know if the board, we want to make sure we understand exactly what you're saying, Mrs. Mumford. It truly makes sense. What is it you want in the policy versus don't want in the policy? If the board can guide us on that, we can start working with our attorney, and we can start presenting you with something, and we can go back and forth like we've done, even like what we did with the survey, right? So I think you're spot on. I appreciate you guiding us to this part of the dialogue, because we do want to shape it based on what the board wants. And we do need to think too, do we want policy to be bare bones and then go into guidelines and then FAQ with procedures? That's something the board's got to discuss, and then we can move accordingly. So we kind of backed off until this meeting because we realized we're putting the cart before the horse. The board hasn't even had this important discussion.
So I think, all 7 board members should share with you their input, and then you decide what to do. My
Agreed.
personal view is it would be extremely helpful if a frequently asked questions document was started and shared with the community. There's a lot of general questions that they're asking. And I think it would be helpful for this policy for administrators to look at it and say, this is what we heard, and here's what we're recommending. And then as a board, we can say, I like this, I don't agree with this, what about doing that? But to me, it feels like all of us trying to change what legal counsel said is just a bunch of extra work when you're not dictating to us by putting in policy, but you are guiding us. And then my third personal opinion is, I think this policy should be as clear and transparent about what our plans are, and not random, vague. If you have a history of absences, we don't want any community member to feel like they don't understand what our policy is. Now, I get the more we put in it, like I said, this is my personal opinion, the more we put into it, the more likely then in the future we have to vote to change it. But what I'm hearing, in my view, is that's what the community wants. They don't want a policy that behind the scenes gets changed. They didn't realize it was getting changed. If it's all in a policy to change any of it, the community is going to be well informed it's being changed, get to have a voice. And so that's why I think it would be helpful to be much more comprehensive, but that's my personal opinion.
And we could absolutely support that. We just, again, we wanted to hear that because there's 2 different ways you could go at that. So I really appreciate the dialogue, and obviously we want to hear everybody. And ultimately, I think we would want to hear in writing, like we have even when we posted the survey from board members, correct? So we could start working on that, Mrs. Roth.
That was going to be my recommendation. George and then Rachel.
Daisha, if you know, I'd be glad to hear from you, or if Sean or Anna, if you know. But you mentioned that in the 7th grade in particular, we were over capacity. Do you know, or does anybody know, if we were over capacity because of people moving in and we had already accepted the allotment of transfers for that time period, or did we accept new transfers that put us over the capacity?
When we're talking about the 7th grade, this is 7th grade, last year's 7th grade, or this year's 7th grade? Okay.
Because that to me would make a huge difference. So if we were already at capacity and then we had some unexpected people move in, there's not a lot anybody can do about that. But if we were at capacity and decided to accept 15 new students from outside the boundaries anyway, then that's the sort of thing that I think most people would have a problem with.
I would love to have included in the policy how to handle that situation, because I think if we set our capacity so high that we accept transfer students and then we get a few families that we didn't anticipate and it pushes us over, in my view, the capacity is set too high. Our capacity needs to be at a level, and that's why I think it'd be helpful to get a recommendation, because we do have in-district students that are choosing to go to school in other schools and then come back into ours at certain grade levels. And so we need to prep for that. We can't accept kindergarten thinking that besides move in and moves out, that's going to keep the same. And so my view is we need a capacity that's going to give us a little flexibility so that we can feel confident to accept a couple transfer students, but then it doesn't push us way over like it is right now, where we're now exceeding quite a bit what we had wanted.
We've talked about that, and I appreciate that. I appreciate you talking about it here. We certainly would want to have dialogue with the board and set what we want it to look like as far as that capacity goes. So what we've given you is a starting point. We understand there may be flexibility there, and we understand that when you open up and may have to go toward a lottery, we've never really had to do that. And what happened, I think, with the 209 was probably the move from elementary to high school, and it caught us off guard. But I agree with you, Mrs. Mumford, we can and should put safeguards in place. And you know that we feel that way because we've talked about that with you before. And I think it's very doable and would want the input of the board as well.
Okay, Rachel.
I don't disagree that there's a need to be very specific in policy, particularly when it comes to that pecking order and whatever. But I do want to throw caution out there, as Mrs. Mumford is saying, hey, I want to make sure that the community can be involved in all of those edits. The other thing that we heard, or I heard on the survey, was that the community and families who are transferring in, they're looking for also some stability. And if every year we're revising a policy that dictates the pecking order and makes changes, what we are doing is taking away that stability. So I do think that there is a sweet spot between flexibility and stability, and good policy will hit that sweet spot. So we can't make it up for debate every single year. It just, to me, that would not be good for our community or our schools.
And even to further support ensuring that community felt safe or comfortable, I think that the reviews would be, is it working what we're doing, or does it need tweaked versus are we dropping? I don't think that anybody on the board would want to go back and forth like that. But in the way that when Mr. Reuter comes and we do look at the budget and we look at capacity, a number of students and enrollment trends, I think the board which the board does now, but would continue to have dialogue, but also would be very transparent with regard to the dialogue related to the policy and the guidelines and the capacity numbers that are set. And even to where, like what we're talking about with the 209, are we in a situation like that again? No one would purposely do that, but as Mrs. Mumford said, is it too close to where it's happened? And then what do we do about it? And so I just think it's good collaborative efforts between administration and the board.
Rachel.
I agree, and the other thing I want to say about that too is that we do have to be aware that TSC in particular, we need to have some level of good neighborliness, and so we also need to have some level of stability for them, and they're not the McDonald's of school corporations who can give us the fries or not, right? So I think that stability extends even beyond the families. It extends into a relationship, a good collaborative working relationship with our surrounding school corporations and leadership.
And we do have that collaborative relationship. We all work very well together, and both districts accept transfers to a degree. So if we became like them, we wouldn't be any less collaborative. In fact, I don't see anything changing.
David?
I'm jumping back a few things. But in terms of capacity, what I think would be really helpful here is having, what is our target? What is our ideal where we're trying to get to? Like, is it 22 per classroom at this age? And what is true capacity? Like, is 24 our max capacity where like it becomes untenable after that, so that we have a target where you can fluctuate a tiny bit over that if necessary, and that's where we're aiming towards having, but it also gives us a little bit of room to make sure that those years where we do have influxes of kids moving into the district, or just larger classes or groups of kids, that can be flexible to not reach what our capacity is. It'll help, I think, target what are the numbers we want for transfers.
Yes, and if you look, what you see now is what we use currently. And so I totally agree. But with that, then, if you want to give input, and so everybody can see it, then we can adjust accordingly.
Is that the target or max capacity?
This-
It says targeted.
Yeah, it is targeted to answer I didn't realize you were asking, I apologize. So I didn't realize you were asking a question. I thought you were saying we would want to do that. And so that's targeted, yes.
Okay, because the max capacity that we have is, I believe it's essentially target class size times total classes, right? And so.
Correct.
But our target average class size, if that's our target, it's also not, our target isn't our capacity, our max capacity. Like, we could go over that and not necessarily have issues, like, right?
We could, but we really work hard, and we even in discussions talk with teachers each year. And so it could even mean that if there were a lot of students on a wait list in a certain grade, if we were having, for example, a lottery, it could be where we were, and it would be the communication, but it's the transparency that we've talked about too, which is a good thing. It could be where if there's 15 students on a wait list and we're at 22 or whatever we set at, so we didn't go over, like we talked about with the 209 situation. It could be where if you get 10 more students, it makes sense to bring in another teacher. And that'd be discussion. We'd have the pros and cons of it as a board, which is what you would do when you determine, even if you were a closed district, of whether or not we were going to open another classroom. I hope I'm answering your question. That would be that ongoing dialogue and reviewing the situation.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to have, what is our target? Like, is our target actually going to be that 22 to 25 per classroom, or is an ideal class size lower than that? But if we had to, we could go over. I think that's a discussion that we should all have
Agreed.
at some point, or get your recommendations on. The other piece that I wanted to come back to was policy versus guidelines and practices. Many of the policies that we have been going through say, and administrator guidelines will be developed. I think this is actually one where those administrator guidelines and practices need to come hand in hand with the policy. And so having as much of that drafted out.
That would be my recommendation. And I hope that we'll have lots of dialogue on that. And we want every board member to feel comfortable with this. But I would recommend not quite as detailed of a policy as guidelines, but that the guidelines are as in the hands of the board as the policy.
Yeah, and that
And posted
those
for all to see.
guidelines are well shared and
Yes.
very clearly made available
Yes.
to the community. So it's super transparent.
And then even with, and we heard this in the focus groups, even an FAQ that is ongoing, developed, and very user-friendly.
Does anybody else on that side of the table have anything they need to share?
Just something that I think to consider is, at least the way I look at them, is policy is something that we are following. Guidelines is something that administrators behind the scenes are doing to meet those policies. And that's why for something like the transfer policy, some of these details I would, like I said, this is my opinion, I would like it part of the policy so it's very clear to our community what's driving it. The process, so for example, somewhere you have to say that you're going to have a publicly verifiable random selection process if we go to a lottery. Okay, to me in policy, it can say that. In administrative guidelines, you can give how you're going to pull that off. That's just like a detail. But a lot of these things that we're talking about, to me, isn't just a guideline. It's an actual policy that we want to put in place as a community and a board. And so that's how I have tried to differentiate which goes in what. And I understand there's a little bit of crossover, but I would like this one to be heavier policy, not just a recommended guideline that administrators have a little bit more control.
I think Mrs. Mumford makes sense. There are certain things this board wants to look different, and that's true for policy, and that's why board votes on policy. It would just take dialogue and making sure that in the end, everybody felt heard, and that those non-negotiables for each board member, they had what they needed to have in there. And then regardless, still hand in hand, the guidelines, and they're posted equally so that it's very transparent and there's trust. We've seen, and some of you have shared this since I got here, that there are questions about the current practice that for me, I came in and I know what we've been doing, but there's questions and in some ways distrust. And the clearer we are, the better. And we want trust and we want community involvement always. And so We've certainly learned through this process that whatever we do, we want to make sure it's accessible, the information, transparent, and that there are places where patrons can get answers on the website.
So there are two different ways we could go about the next step. What I think is reasonable is for Dr. Greiner and his team to take all of the information that they've gained from the survey, from the in-person and virtual forums, from all of us, and bring to us in February a first reading document that does its very best to fold in all that information, with the understanding that the seven of us and the community still has the opportunity to email them, us, him, with their recommendations or their concerns during that couple weeks between now and the February meeting. And then if we can first reading it in February and have a really close maybe or workable document, then in March we can second reading and vote. Is that going to work for you?
Absolutely, and we'll start working on like back and forth Friday notes like we've done to make sure that this is fluid and ongoing. And like I said, we were already toying around with some stuff. We just didn't go, we backed way off because we realized you needed to have this discussion and you needed to start guiding us on what you wanted. But what we'll want to know as we do this is, are you wanting more leaning toward policy or less as we draft some stuff? And we'll work on it as we go, and we will work with our attorney as we go too, so that even when we get to the next policy meeting, we've heard information and we're able to have dialogue with the members, but also report if we're all responding in the way that you do, where you're including each other. Hopefully voices will be heard throughout this process from day one.
That sounds good to me. David?
I'm wondering if board members could all share anything that you expect to be put into the policy or the guidelines with Dr. Greiner and the rest of the board in the next 2 days. Because I just thinking timeline, today is the 29th, correct? Next week, or the next board meeting is on the 9th. If we were to try to squeeze in a policy board meeting, we could, if we make a decision now, we could potentially do that Tuesday, or Wednesday morning. And then that would give very little time, or just a little bit of time for the administration to revise things and get everything posted for first reading. So if everybody's able to provide specifics on what they want, that way, because my worry is that we get to a first reading, comes to policy committee, and it's a pretty thorough overhaul that might require that it goes to another first reading if it's substantially different. So if we can get all of that in, or all of the feedback in today and tomorrow, and then let's try after this meeting to schedule a policy committee meeting. If timeline works out, I think that would be helpful to make sure this process moves quickly.
Right, yeah, knowing that you didn't have a meeting before our next meeting was why I went that direction first. But if you guys can make that happen, I think that'd be great too. I don't care from where it comes as long as we can move quickly, not for me or for my own aims, but because I know we have families waiting on us to make a decision, and I want them to have as much time as possible to make the right decision for their family. Okay? Everybody cool? Any final comments or remarks or any for the good of the order? Yue, go ahead.
I think for the capacity that we have been talking about, and it's very important to make sure that we have a total capacity and also capacity for each of the grade. Another idea I heard actually from the community is we can also set up the capacity as a percentage. So that way we can prevent people from maybe they don't move out, but as for new families, they don't have the cost for moving, then they will be motivated to live outside if we keep taking more and more transfers. So if we set the percentage limit, okay, for example, currently our transfer students is 6.9%. And so if we set up that percentage, let's say 7% or something like that, then that means at some point we will reach that limit. Then people have to compete for the spots. Another thing is I understand the stability that everybody wish for, but we have to be aware that at some time we cannot guarantee that, and guarantee that once you are in, you are always in. For example, what if all in a sudden we have more in-district students? What if we have more staff members students? We will prioritize them, right? We will prioritize in-district residents. We will prioritize staff members' case. Then if we take everybody, then the number will be over the limit we set up before. So that break our promise to the residents. So I know the possibility is low, but I just feel we shouldn't put ours in the certain situation that we have to take some liability because we overpromise things. And also I heard from the community about the sibling issue. I totally understand the importance of family union, but we should be aware that we shouldn't be overpromise. And what if we reach the limit, and should we still take their siblings? And so we cannot promise, because for every new transfer students, we check our capacity and we make a decision. But we, at the same time, if we promise our sibling, what should we do? Should we keep the promise for the residents, or should we keep the promise for the transfer students? So we will be in the position that we cannot satisfy keep two promises. So we shouldn't meet ourselves in that position. And another point I think is very important is whatever policy we set up, they should be annual. We need to do annual review. Make sure that, we don't promise anything forever, basically. And so the policy will change. And for example, whether we will charge or not the transfer fee will change based on the state policy. There's no guaranteed whatever forever promise. And so I think that's very important to put it there. That will give us the opportunity to review it every year to make any adjustment rather than make ourselves liable for anything we said. So.
Okay, I'm sorry I giggled. I thought of a terrible joke about that's where we get those half students. So you were, anyway, sorry, Rachel, please.
I want to say that it's a conversation I had many times over the past forever about students coming in on transfer. The only way to 100% guarantee that your child can attend West Lafayette schools is to live inside of the corporation boundaries. I think that is a known fact, and that is definitely bear repeating. Families who do not live in corporation, just in the boundaries, there is intrinsically a risk to that situation. And I don't think there's ever been an attempt to hide that or bury that. So I agree that that's a relevant point to make to people as they look in.
I think you make a great point, Mrs. Witt, that is the only guarantee. And I think Dr. Yen makes a really good point that it's really important to have a disclaimer somewhere. And so please send that to us, whether it's directly in the policy or it's stated somewhere related to transfers. And we heard that clearly in the focus groups, didn't we? Those of you that, well, we heard it from the report of our consultant too. So I think you're making great points, and we hope to see the suggestions from you, the guidance, and we're going to make sure that we work hard to start getting some of this on paper or in writing, and then we'll work hard to go back and forth with you to get it where the board is comfortable.
And on that note, and it may be worth repeating in whatever policy we come up with, not only are you not guaranteed if you don't live within the boundaries, if you don't live within the boundaries and you do transfer, we don't transport you.
Yeah, that's true. which is a definite value for me.
Yeah, it's just, we need to make sure that we don't really leave loopholes there. And because, for example, we also heard about our staff member, we support staff members, make sure their kids can study here. But what if somebody just work here for a very short time, they transfer their kids in, once they are in, they can forever be in, that sort of situation. And maybe it's really rare, but we just make sure our policy is robust enough and to avoid situation that people can play with the policy, and it's just make sure there's no loopholes. And so I think leave some kind of uncertainty for the transfer, also motivate people to live here, basically, and to support us and accept maximum.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank all of you for the respectful and productive dialogue tonight. I think this was a really useful meeting, and I'm sorry it was long, but I think it was needed. And please do email your thoughts to everyone, to the board.whatever.West Lafayette, so that we can hear from the community, and also from among each other, that we have that recorded. Would the two of you who came in after this was collected be sure to sign in before you leave, just so we know you were here? And if that's everything from everyone, I'll go ahead and adjourn we did that in the middle. Unless, did either of you have anything to communicate? Okay, then we're all set. 8:11 p.m. Thank you.